Deanna Henson is a certified athletic therapist and founder of Fluid Isometrics and Block Therapy, a bodywork practice that is therapy, exercise, and meditation all in one. Deanna believes that block therapy is the solution. Deanna's taken what she did in the treatment room and as an athletic therapist and translated it into a self-help practice using a handcrafted wooden block called the Block Buddy. This simple, efficient, and inexpensive approach is gaining credibility as people around the world are experiencing the benefits of block therapy and sharing it with others. Deanna's work benefits people of all ages as well as any condition. Focusing on the fascia system, her work teaches people to melt through adhesions and scar tissue, ultimately awakening cells previously blocked from blood and oxygen. From those with debilitating issues to the elite athlete, this work can be modified to address any situation. Deanna has developed an online teacher training program, Block Therapy University. There are currently over 135 people globally either certified as instructors or going through the process.
Welcome, Deanna. How
Hi,
are
thank you so
you?
much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have this chance to actually meet you somewhat in person, at least face to face. And you have a very interesting topic, something that I've been following for probably about 2 years now, and met with one of a block therapist of yours that sort of introduced me. So can you just start out, because I think this is, at least for me and the people that I, like the clients that I meet and people that I run into, I feel like what you do is still sort of an untapped area. And whenever I say like fluid isometrics, people are like, what are you talking about? So can you tell me a little bit about what is fluid isometrics, or actually tell our listeners here about what is fluid isometrics and block therapy?
Absolutely. So fluid isometrics is the therapeutic technique I started developing about 20 years ago. It's focused in the fascia system. And what makes it unique is it follows the lines of the way energy travels. So basically, energy travels in waves and spirals. There's nothing in nature that travels in straight lines. And I was an athletic therapist certified in 1995, and I always focused on deep tissue work. And it was when I was having a life crisis at the age of 30 that this whole thing developed for me. I had made some major changes to my life. And prior to that, even though I had a successful practice with clients, I was very personally affected by negative emotion, behaviors, addiction, all of those things. And my body was just simply not responding to what I had learned as an athletic therapist to create a healthy body. One of the things that was happening was I was getting bigger and bigger the harder I was working to try to force my body into being the way I wanted it and expected it to be. With that came increased anxiety, increased chronic pain, just everything in my life was I was really, really struggling. So I made some major changes at the age of 30. And as a result of making those positive changes, I started undergoing some incredibly powerful anxiety attacks, which prior to that moment, I used drinking to suppress. So one of those major changes I made was to quit drinking. And now I was having to view my life from a different perspective. And that really caused those anxiety attacks to ramp up as I had a lot of major changes that I needed to make. So this one anxiety attack in particular was the start of this whole thing for me. In that moment, I actually thought I was going to die. I was so frozen in fear, I couldn't catch my breath. And for some reason, I dove my hand deep into my abdomen. Now, this was where I had carried my 50 extra pounds of weight. So I never touched that area of my body because I literally hated it or let anyone else touch me there. So now I'm diving my hand into this space. And the first thing I encountered was pain. But the pain took me out of the anxiety. It brought me back to the ground. I knew I was breathing. I was safe in the moment. So that was in itself just such a gift. But what I also observed was how marbled my tissue felt. Now, having been an athletic therapist already for 5 years at that point, I always focused on deep tissue work. So I was very aware of scar tissue in the body, but I worked on my patients' backs, legs, necks, as we typically do where chronic pain is. And so now I'm in my own tissue, and I haven't had any injuries or surgeries in the abdomen yet. This is what I'm feeling, this marbly, dense scar tissue. And I started having these aha moments that no wonder when I'm coming back from a 5-mile run, dripping wet with sweat, my belly still feels cold. And this was the area that I always wanted to change. I used to do 400 sit-ups a day, Thai bow, or I mean, I was doing anything and everything to try to force my body to become the way I wanted it to look and feel. And the harder I worked, the worse I got. So this moment, it was so enlightening because not only did I feel calm in the moment, I also felt heat and change. So I played around in my own tissue just intuitively for about 45 minutes, woke up the next day, went to work, and was feeling really excited for the first time in a long time, feeling really calm. And I was wanting to get back home to continue the exploration in my own body. And I did for another 45 minutes or so. I was working in through this area. And after that second day, when I stood up, I felt taller. And I went over to the mirror and I looked at myself and I literally started to cry because my belly was flatter than it had looked in years, in 2 days. Something so accessible, just literally at my fingertips. So this became my new addiction, literally. And I would come home every day. I would continue working on my body. And then I was having all these other amazing changes, like my chronic low back pain of years was improving. And I was just waking up feeling really excited about every day. So I started flipping my patients onto their backs and I started exploring in their bodies, and I was having these incredible results. So it wasn't that long after that I started attracting therapists that wanted to learn my technique. And interestingly, in the beginning, I was just intuitively following some path. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. So, the whole process forced me to really begin to understand what was unique and what was different about what I was doing, because I was getting results that people simply weren't getting. And really the fluid isometrics technique came down to following that path of the golden mean, or the Fibonacci sequence, the way energy travels in waves and spirals. In fact, everything in nature is based on this Fibonacci sequence, the way the body develops, the galaxies, the spiral pattern of everything in nature. Even this is the Fibonacci sequence, as is the way that we age. So as we become older, we become shorter and wider typically. Gravity's constantly compressing us, but we don't age in a linear fashion. We literally wind down over time based on our lifetime, whether we're dominant, well, we're always dominant on one side, but what side we're dominant on, the injuries and surgeries, the sports we play, instruments we play, how we basically use our body all the time. It winds in that Fibonacci sequence. So when we can tap into that spiral pattern in the tissue, we become really efficient at unlocking the seams of time, awakening cells that have been previously blocked, and everything changes. So along the way, I was training therapists in my technique, having really great results, but I really wanted to teach people self-care. And the handwork is challenging because fascia will grip and adhere to bone with a force up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. Now, this is something that is hard to grasp because, I mean, the concept of that force always inside of us is hard to measure because it's always there. We're so used to it. It's kind of like gravity. We don't really feel gravity. We see the effects over time, but we don't really feel it so much. So being able to get the hands into the tissue deep enough to the bone where the fascia will grip is a challenge. So I started developing block therapy probably about 10 years ago. It was, again, an intuitive process, but lying on the tool, the Block Buddy, I have one right
I have
here.
one.
Yeah. So the thing about this tool that makes it unique is partly the size and the shape. I spent 2 years playing around with this, and been using cedar. So the thing about the tool is the fascia grips to bone, which is deep inside. And that is really where the root of our suffering is. So we need to get to the bone to actually create a release so that we can awaken the cells that have been previously blocked. Now, cedar and bone are similar in density. And that is the key with the tool. If we use something that's softer or plastic, or we're even rolling on the surface, we stay on the surface. And the problems are deep in the body. So we need to be able to drive through the adhesions that develop between the layers of fascia to create that magnetic release at the bone so that we can access, most importantly, the diaphragm, because the diaphragm is the key to everything. We have been given this amazing muscle in the body, and it's unique because it's the only muscle that's under both our conscious and unconscious control. So if we're not conscious breathers, we're still breathing. We're still going to breathe. Our body is built to survive. When we connect proper diaphragmatic breathing, we're actually built to thrive. And breathing from those different places creates an entirely different physiology, an entirely different brainwave pattern. When we breathe through the muscles of the upper chest, it connects us to a stress pattern in the brain, thoughts of past and future. When we connect to the diaphragm, it connects us to a relaxed brain pattern, and it keeps us in the moment so that we can truly view each moment as unique and respond accordingly so that we can stay present and happy and functioning as well as we can. But also, and I read this in Stephen Cope's book, Yoga and the Quest for the True Self, the first time I read this, was that when we breathe diaphragmatically, we feed the body up to 6 times the amount of oxygen. And I completely believe that. And it's not about increasing the amount of volume in the lungs, it's about the absorption rate, because at the base of the lungs is really where we need to bring the breath down to create that proper absorption of oxygen, as well as that full toxin release. In fact, in 2014 in Australia, they did a study that proved that 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation. And I love that because I was that person in my 20s, working really hard, not ingesting a lot of calories, and getting bigger. So it's like, why are the rules of weight loss not applying to me? And, you know, I understood it because I simply was so frozen in my body. I wasn't accessing that full exhalation that moves the toxins, moves the carbon dioxide, all of the waste out of the body. So as I started working with this process, very quickly, my body started to change, my mood started to change, my chronic pain started to improve. And it is a full body program. Fascia connects us from head to toe, but we always start in the core because the key is to connect to that proper diaphragmatic breath. And then we turn on to become so much more efficient at healing, at keeping our systems working, and keeping joy and creativity more on the forefront of our lives.
I'm with you 100% when it comes to the breathing. And I have clients that come in all the time and it's like, you know, I want to lose 50 pounds. I want to lose 60 pounds. And I always say, okay, we're going to start with breathing. And they're like, breathing, why? Why is, you know, why do I need to learn how to breathe? I just want to get to the work. I just want to do it. But you're absolutely right that, you know, everything from getting the 70% of those oxygen receptors that are in the lower lobes of the lungs to that, even just the pumping action of the diaphragm, massaging internal organs, and then, you know, in order for them to be able to release, and so like your lymphatic system is doing a better job of allowing the body to detox, and, you know, the whole relaxation. I love how you talked about the upper chest too, and this not being an area that we should breathe. Because one of the first things I do is I say, let's put a hand here and let's put a hand down here on sort of that lower rib cage belly area. And where is the breath going? And most people will, you know, will breathe like that. And I think especially, and I don't know if you, you know, have heard of this, but with women too, because we have, because we're typically smaller and we have narrower areas for for our arteries and our veins to be running through. I have done some reading that when we tend to, you know, as women, if we're chest breathers a lot, because of what happens posturally, you can start to have a lot of, you know, neck, shoulder, and upper back issues due to the constriction that happens through that, because of those muscles being too tight, right?
For sure. And it's interesting because pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. So who isn't struggling with pain, fear, and stress at some point all the time? So, I mean, it's prevalent, right? And, you know, when I was born, I don't know how old you are, you're beautiful and you look very young, but I'm 51.
Thank you.
So I was brought up before computers were part of normal life and in schools. So when my generation, we were born breathing diaphragmatically. Pain, fear, and stress over time cause us to reactively hold the breath. So these muscles in the upper chest kick in. And what that ultimately does is, because the diaphragm muscle is the foundation of the rib cage, the head, and the shoulder joints, if we don't keep that muscle strong and active, it starts becoming weak. It becomes a weak foundation. And that is ultimately what causes the rib cage to fall in to the core, causing a ballooning of the belly, but also adding all of this weight and displacement of the internal organs, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
70% of the population are right-handed. So when we're right-handed, we typically collapse more into the left side of the rib cage because we use that arm more to be mobile and for action. So we tend to collapse through here. Now, on this left side, we have the heart, we have the aorta, the main artery leaving the heart. And when we collapse this way, it creates that tube being compressed and twisted. So now the heart has to work that much harder. And
Oh, wow.
also it blocks the base of the lungs from connecting to that breath and from being able to move all of that waste out of the body. So that is partly what drives that forward alignment, and it causes chronic issues with stress. It causes everything, because ultimately, as long as cells are fed and clean, they're going to be youthful, doing their job and not screaming at you. It's when we ask them to work on our behalf, but yet we're not feeding them properly, that they first will start to send a signal of pain, because that's the baby crying. It's the cell saying, hi, you're asking me to do my work, but yet you're not giving me what I need to thrive. So pain is that initial signal. And if we pay attention in the moments, we can give those cells what they require in that moment. If we ignore it through medications or through posturally avoiding that issue or that pain, then eventually it screams louder, louder, louder. If they are continued to be ignored, eventually that area gets shut off. So when that happens, that's when things like diseases can set in, because now we have an area that isn't being properly fed and clean, and it becomes acidic and dirty, and that attracts negative things that we don't want in the body. So it's really amazing, because it all is so simple in concept. Ultimately, every cell needs to be positioned where it should be to receive proper amounts of blood and oxygen driven by the diaphragm, and to move waste out of the system to keep it clean and alkaline, so that we're healthy, and we can handle when things come in, because we are very efficient at moving them out of the body. It's when we allow things to enter this system of ours, and we're basically like a sponge. Every environment, every frequency of energy, it all gets brought in. If we don't allow it to leave, it starts adding up, and then we get weighty and heavy and toxic, and we start ballooning, and that stops the proper flow of information to the brain in the moments to respond accordingly, and we start relying on memory. And again, memory is thoughts of future and past, where fear is. And when we do that, we respond from a place of fear as opposed to responding from a place of love. And life is never great when we respond from those places of fear. I've done it lots. And there's always those negative consequences.
We're all guilty of that. It's
Aren't we, though?
part of the human experience. But you're absolutely like, if you can, bringing more awareness and breaking that down is definitely beneficial, to being able to at least recognize, like, why your responses are happening. And yeah,
Exactly.
but it's amazing how it can be, end up being held in the body, all of those, those emotions and those fears and those reactions. And like you said, it kind of creates a pattern.
And that's
a memory.
Yeah, and that's the really fun part about doing this work, because when we dive into the block and we put that space back into the tissue that we've lost over time, basically we're decompressing fascia. We open up that area to all of those things you just mentioned. It's not only physical things that leave, it's also negative emotion, negative memories that have been trapped and caught, which also adds weight and sluggishness to the system. So by opening that up, everything starts to become cleaner. And then we really take positive steps forward in all aspects of our life so that we can live a cleaner, more open and healthy life.
Deanna, we've really talked about the importance of breathing and that diaphragm, not only when it comes to block therapy, but just overall health, wellness, and strength of the core. And you've also talked on the significance and the value of the lymphatic system and proper posture. But I understand there's still a lot more advantages and benefits to block work and fascial release and fluid isometrics to our core system. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about some of those.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, with the whole collapse, we become very toxic inside. So that will affect digestion. It will affect the liver's ability to clean itself. It will affect the pancreas from being able to control blood sugar. It will affect our ability to break down fats to utilize properly throughout the whole body. It keeps us constipated or inflammation stuck in the core, so we feel bloated. And that affects everything. It affects the mood. This whole thing started for me out of an anxiety attack. And what I've come to learn is I don't have anxiety. If I'm feeling anxious, it's because my cells are anxious because they're not getting what they need. So what we feel in the body is messages from our cells to give us information so that we can have a response and do what is appropriate to keep those cells happy. And I think one of the big issues is people identify themselves with the name of something, as opposed to realizing that some of your cells are not getting what they need to do their work, and now they're giving you information. So if we can kind of pull our egos outside of what we feel in our body, we can look at it from a different perspective, and we can then approach the body in a kind and profound way that is so amazing. Because, you know, for me, like the force I used to use to try to force my body to succumb to what I wanted made me worse. And as soon as I started applying kindness and more rest into my body, I started having these amazing changes. Now, one of the things too, when we understand what the proper diaphragmatic breathing is doing, to me, that is the most efficient way at changing the shape and size of your core. Because when we're consciously exhaling, we are actually doing a core contraction with each and every breath, but it's not forceful like doing a sit-up. Again, I did 400 sit-ups a day, and what that did was it made me shorter in the front, which forced my tissue to balloon outward, and it affected my ability to digest and eliminate. So I became constipated. So now I have more mass inside of me. And so all of that created such a negative, unhealthy system for me. And by doing this work, you open things up and you start to clean everything out. And healthy cells that are clean, they look beautiful. So if we
I'm with you. I'm anti crunch movement all the way over here. Yeah, really, really good point about the crunching.
Not to mention too, just sort of staying on the vanity side of things, something like cellulite, for example. So it's understanding the fascia system and what it's doing for us, and it's ultimately here to protect us. So as I was mentioning, part of what block therapy is understanding proper foundation. So for example, if we're tipping over to one side all the time, I mean, you look at postures, and we're like a building. We have foundations designed to support cellular alignment, but if we don't apply those foundations, and most people don't, we'll sit in front of the chair slouched, or we'll stand more weight on one leg, or we'll collapse into ourselves. So the fascia will grip to bone to create stability from us tipping over, but energy moves in waves and spirals. So those grips happen in little spirals. That creates the dimpling appearance of tissue. So that will create the appearance of cellulite. But even more importantly than that, that's an indicator that that's where you have fascia gripping to bone, thereby blocking flow to cells on the other side, which will make those cells toxic, and down the road, potential for injury and increased pain. So this works through the whole body. It is a whole body program. We start in the core to get that breath strong, but ultimately we work from head to toe. And it really is about putting every cell back to where it's supposed to be. The further the cell migrates away from where it's supposed to be, the more problems that cell is going to have. And when one cell starts moving, the whole body starts shifting. So it is a full body understanding how the fascia connects every single cell together, even how messages move through the system from consciousness. You know, the fascia is the tissue that
Yeah.
consciousness travels through. So when it's blocked, that is also blocked. And ultimately, it's all about putting the space back into the body that time has taken away. And when we do that, we are in control in a very different way of the aging process than what we currently understand today.
I had met someone through one of your other block therapists, a client of theirs, and they were had been struggling with a lot of cellulite and a lot of loose skin and stretched skin from having been overweight and lost weight. And I remember I had met her now after she had been doing block for, I want to say, maybe 3 to 4 months. And she showed me her before and after pictures. And I was really surprised because even as a trainer that had been doing things for a long time, and sometimes I'd have women that would say, like, can I get rid of this loose skin around my belly after having, multiple children or a child that was really stretched? And sometimes I didn't really know exactly what to say to that because everyone's body is different, and you do see some people that somewhat bounce back from it, but then there's a lot of articles out there that say you can't get rid of that. And I saw this woman's before and after pictures, and she said that all she was doing was walking, hydrating really well, and doing blocks a couple times a day, like laying on the block and doing her breathing work. And her pictures, she had really retracted from like the skin hanging down basically over her like underwear line in the photo to it coming back and you being able to see like her, basically the full underwear, the bathing suit bottoms that she was wearing. And she was working on, I think, like tricep as well. And there was a lot of cellulite that had disappeared within that process as well during that. So that was, when I saw that for myself, I started to be able to say to my clients, like, absolutely.
The integration of blood flow from releasing that scar tissue at the bone, which really is the key. And I mean, so many women have had maybe C-sections or surgeries in the pelvis that will manipulate, because scar tissue will grip to bone. It gets really sticky. And over time, it continues to add up. So especially if you've had multiple surgeries, it can stick to bone and create tons of pain and blockage. So by getting in there and releasing that scar tissue from the bone, it allows those cells that have been blocked to start to regenerate, rejuvenate, reintegrate into use again. Because, and same with the skin on the face. I mean, why do we get older? It's the same reason. Fascia grips and adheres to skin, causes a block to that tissue, and gravity eventually, I mean, it's elastic, right? So eventually it starts hanging down. But when we release those grips on the skin, we get that tissue to be properly fed and clean again, and it starts to become alive again, essentially. There's nothing dead in a living body. There's only tissue blocked from life, and this gets rid of those blocks.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. And I think, you know what, you're in your 50s, you look like you're in your 30s. So something must be working well for you with what you're doing.
Thank you.
So I'm sure that people would love to probably, know more about what you do, and where can they find you? And in order to learn more, maybe learn more about, the Block University, if they're practitioners or trainers that want to maybe specialize in it.
Well, my website, blocktherapy.com, is a great place to go. We have a YouTube channel, we have blogs, we have lots of information on the different things that we offer. We have an amazing member site full of multiple programs for people to follow. And most importantly, I love guiding people into my Block Therapy Community Facebook group. It's a private group, but we accept everybody. And what is so wonderful about that is there's over 3,000 people in there right now, and it's growing every day. And these are people that all block. So if somebody has a question about, say, something like fibromyalgia or something specific, you're going to have people in there giving feedback from their own personal experiences, which to me is the most important thing. In lieu of research, this to me is real research. It's giving people the tool, having them share experience, and that is what is real. And this community is filled with people willing to share, to support, and to guide. So I just love it there because it really is a lovely supportive group. And I wouldn't be able to be doing what I'm doing without the community. So that's really where the magic is.
That's amazing. Well, your links will be in the show notes. So if you're looking for Deanna, pop into the show notes. Deanna's free gift will also be in there. Which, do you want to just tell everyone what your free gift is?
Yep, absolutely. There's two, actually. My book, Fascia Decompression, The Missing Link in Self-Care. It's really my journey of the last 20 years, as well as each chapter has a testimonial from somebody that's been blocking for a long period of time or a period of time. So it's lovely to be able to see the differences and how it has profoundly affected individuals. As well, we also put together a video to teach people that don't have a block or might not be able to afford anything. We teach people how to use a partner to gain the same understanding of lifting that rib cage up, melting through the adhesions in the body, and accessing the diaphragm. As long as you have a partner, that's all you need. So both of those are part of that free gift.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here today and for all the wonderful information you shared. And check out the show notes, guys, and you can find Deanna's free gift and her links to be able to learn more. So
Thank you so
thanks
much.
very much. Have a great day.